Okay, so this is Brittnee Bond from Remote Collective and Bondworks, and I am here talking to Nicola from Berlin, right? You're in Berlin?
Yeah, exactly. I'm based in Berlin.
Awesome. So shoot me with some questions. I'm happy to answer anything.
So, first of all, how would you describe co-living?
To me, co-living is people who, the co-living version that I run and that I manage is people who have their own remote jobs or their own jobs, and they share resources. So they share a house or a communal space. So maybe they all have their own room or maybe even just their own apartment, but then they have a communal space like a co-working space or a kitchen where everyone comes together because they want community. And the reason why it is a co-living space, in my opinion, is it's intentional, like they want the intentional like sharing of something. Otherwise, you can just have your own space.
So you just mentioned community. So what do you think? How do you create this, or yeah, how can you create that community? I mean, you know, sharing spaces, you can always put a shared space somewhere, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you create a community by doing so.
So how to create community, that's all you're asking? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I have facilitation training in creating communities, and the thing that they always say is that a community needs to come together around a shared purpose, or they call it community of practice. So that means like we call them like rituals. So like every Wednesday we know that there's going to be a social event. Every Friday we know there's going to be some sort of business event. And those are things that kind of build the layers of community. And when you, I'm gonna move away, there's a fan here that is loud. When you move away, when you have communities, they say that you need to have seven positive touch points for every one negative touch point.
Mm-hmm.
So in a community, you need to have times where everyone's coming together and everyone's just hanging out together without any like agenda in order for you to have the community that's being built. So it's like people, that's what a family is, you know, like everyone's coming together around a shared purpose of like making sure everyone's okay, this and that. And the different communities I've built around the world, it's like people who have the same interests. So like a community, a co-working space that I've run, you know, maybe they're all startups. So everyone needs startup advice. There's another one that's like based in Bali. Everyone likes to surf. Everyone wants to hang out and have a beer. So it's more of a social community. So I would say they all have themes, and you have to figure out what your theme is and then build the community based on that. Otherwise it's going to be there's nothing tying everyone together, and then they don't feel like they belong there. You need to create a reason why people belong. And yes, I'm living out in the middle of nowhere right now in Portugal.
That's nice. Really jealous. So do you think, for example, I was at quarters last time. Do you think that there needs to be a certain selection process in order to make sure that people share the same values, share the same background, share the same hobbies, um, in order to have that community, or that certain community? Or do you think that they would also kind of create that by just forming that co-living or co-living group?
I think so. I've run my own co-living company, and the thing that I've realized is it's worse to have more people with bad vibes than it is to have less people where everyone's on the same page. And I don't think you need to get down to like, what is your hobby? And your hobby needs to match my hobby. I think it's more of we have certain foundational values of like keeping things clean that we all share and doing this and that, like little house things. But then the bigger, major thing is this people that are open to connection. Because I've had people sign up for my co-living company where they just wanted things taken care of for them. And then they viewed us as a hotel, basically. And that killed like the whole vibe of like everyone sharing. It's not, they didn't want to share, they just wanted things taken care of for them. And that's not the reason why that kills like the community side of it, because then those people are not coming with an open mind and the willingness to share and give back.
Okay, yeah, I agree. But then I had another conversation, and there it was said that actually you wouldn't think that co-living is something for introverts, for example, but that you could also make co-living attractive attractive to introverts. So, for example, you have shared rooms where you can where you can drink beers or chat
Mhm.
or socialize, watch TV for extroverts, and then more like an introvert's room where they can read books and other stuff. Or do you think it's more? It's really more co-living is really more for extroverts who are open to meet other people and want to share?
I think most co-living spaces are geared towards extroverts just because it's easier, just like our whole society is geared towards extroverts. But I think if you create the intention of hosting that space, then I think it's possible to create room for everyone. Like
Mm-hmm.
what most of my best friends, I am super, super extroverted. Most of my best friends are introverted. And the reason
Mm-hmm.
why they like me is because they say I'm their whole social scene. Like anytime they want to do something, they just call me up. I'm like, oh yeah, I have like 5 events here. Come to this thing, and it's like their one reason why they left the house that week, but it's like really exciting and they save up all their energy to go, and then they go and they have a nice time. And I think
Yeah.
that's why I don't necessarily like co-living spaces where you have to share the same room. I think that everyone should have their own room that or something they can hide away to, and then they can join the group whenever they feel like joining, whenever they have the energy for. I think it's really important to have your own space that you can kind of just relax and do your own thing. But I don't think it has to be introvert extrovert. Actually, a lot of introverted people have joined our co-living companies that I've run because they are so bad at meeting other people that they're like, oh, this is going to force me to have friends, or like I'll have built-in friends. And it does, it works, but they just need to make sure that they're monitoring themselves so they can go and have that quiet time in order to
Yeah, 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 sure. I agree. Okay, nice. And then you just mentioned purpose-built communities, but do you think, because I couldn't find any categories in co-living yet. So if you would categorize co-living spaces, or if you would try to see the main differences, what do you think would those be?
Well, I live in resort destinations like Thailand and Bali, so that's definitely a category of co-living. So that's people who are like traveling, working remotely, and they just kind of they don't live there. They just want to like pop into these beautiful places and have a community, but also like the country is so different from them. They need help getting set up. So that's a very specific type of community. And then there's ones where the pricing in the city, like London or even Berlin, these co-living spaces are popping up because we're getting priced out. We can't afford to live somewhere, so we need to share. And I think it's like urban co-living. There's a term for it. I can't remember what it is right now, but it's like out of demand because of housing crisis. People
Mm-hmm.
are but then I think within niches of co-living spaces, I've seen some pop up like around, especially in Northern Europe, um, like family-run co-living communes. And everyone has enough money to live on their own. They just kind of like to be able to live near people where they can like have their kids, hang out together, and it's more of a sharing economy. Um, and then there's ones that are more tech-based, so like accelerator programs. So you go and stay in the co-living space, and you go through like an incubator. So there's tons of these type of things popping up, but I think the two main ones is like resort destinations, and then like yeah, urban co-living.
Okay. And when you said you have your own co-living company, is there a certain way you design them, or have you heard something around social architecture?
Yeah.
Um,
What I found to work best is, so we would go around different countries, and sometimes we take over a mansion, sometimes we take over an apartment block. But the thing that really made sense when I was consulting is, so say you have 10 rooms, every 10 rooms, if that's a floor, then have a communal space per every 10 rooms. Because like
mhm,
people like, this is what I always say, and when I consult, people love the idea of the pool and the kitchen, but they're really not going to use it that much. So if you
mhm,
have it there and it's accessible, then you have it on your floor. You can access it if you need to, even the living room. But a lot of people are in and out and they don't use it that much. And then what was it? Oh, well, so on a structural side, I think that it's important just to have a main communal area and a big enough event space, because if you get everyone together and you can't fit, that kind of sucks. But then
mhm,
from a community standpoint, what you said about like applying, I think it's really, really good for people to understand that this should be an exclusive community that people have to apply to get into, because that's how you protect the community. You're only as good as your community. And I
Mhm.
think it's really important for people, like I'm setting up a co-living space right now in Chiang Mai, and it's going to be like VIP, like luxury co-living, and people have to apply to get in. And like, it's not about like trying to get people there. I'm like, do you qualify to be part of our community? Because we have exclusive events that no one else gets to. You know, I know everyone in the city, so like you get access to like my list of people if you need help with anything. So there's a lot of things that people can leverage. I don't think they realize that we're still stuck in like the early phase where it's like real estate companies have unused spaces and they're like exploring whether they can just throw some people in there. Kind of like how co-working spaces are, people are like serviced offices is a co-working space. Like, no, it's not. If you take away the community, it's just an office and a desk.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned your VIP events, but how do you generally do you include your residents when you organize your events, and what kind of events do you organize? Yeah.
I just did a webinar on this yesterday. So the foundation of events that I do is like, it's learning and connection based is like the bottom. So you always should have like learning and connection type of events. So people doing skill shares, masterminds, those should happen on a regular basis, like every week. Speed networking, orientation breakfasts, those are all things that should be happening. And then the second layer is impact. So uh, in Bali, I was helping manage the co-working space, and I helped set up a co-giving program. So we connected the local nonprofits with people in the space that could make a website for them or do design work. And I think co-working and co-living has a really big opportunity to make impact in our local community. And I think we need to be like setting this as a precedence. So that's the second layer. And people like to get involved. They want to feel like they're doing something good. Like a lot of my friends, we all travel around everywhere and we want to help. You know, we have skills that can help, but we don't know how to access it. We don't. So if we can use the space as the bridge between those two, I think that's a really positive thing. And then the top one is fun. Everyone wants to have fun. So like beer nights, pool parties, once a month do a barbecue. I think that's pretty, those are like ritual events that you should be doing all the time in your space.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could go on and on about that. I love that stuff.
Really nice, that pyramid. Um, I agree. And then you've said before, for example, a swimming pool that's not going to be used by residents, which I agree. But then, what do you think are the elements that are crucial to call yourself co-living? Such as, do you need a shared kitchen, or do you need, yeah, what do you need, and what is up to you?
Well, you need a place for people to live. You need a place for
Mm-hmm.
people to work. I think that that's super important. Like, even if it's just in the kitchen or living room, have a good table and good Wi-Fi. Those for me are like foundational things. In
Mm-hmm.
places that are not Southeast Asia, I think you need a kitchen because food is really expensive and people expect to have some sort of home environment. Right now in Chiang Mai, I'm playing around with the idea of not having a communal kitchen because the restaurant that we'll have in the building is so affordable that the people, and it's a luxury co-living space that I don't see people even cooking anyways.
Yeah.
But I think that in countries, especially in Europe and America and whatever, they're like, it's so expensive for food compared to just cooking at home that I think you should probably have one. All the pool and the gym and all that stuff is super extra. I think that's, people would rather have a really good community than a pool that no one goes to.
Mhm. Exactly. And then regarding that, what services do you offer? Because there are so many different models, that some are full service with housekeeping and with deliveries and with, I don't know, with what else, so many activities, and then not activities but services. And then others say, for example, they rather have a low rental price and exclude housekeeping services or whatever else there is. So how do you do that?
I think that you have to decide if you want higher tier, middle tier, lower tier, and then
Yeah.
accommodate your community in that way. And that will also affect your events and everything. And it's also different depending on what country you're in. So, like in Asia, it's so cheap to have housing, like cleaning. Like cleaner is so cheap. So to me, it's a no-brainer to have that built in. But like if you're in Europe or America, that's a question you have to factor in. Like, because you either need to add that into how much you're charging people, or you need to put it up for a vote, say like, do you guys want to, like, we can organize it, but you guys have to pay for it. You know, all of this stuff is things people need to think of. But I think if you're in, I went on a tour of 5 or 6 co-living spaces across Europe this spring, and I made a documentary series about it.
Mhm.
And that most of the ones, pretty much all of them, had house cleaning. I think that it was like people are moving around so much that it was built in. I think the only time you would question whether house cleaning or any of those extra amenities wouldn't be taken care of would be if it was more urban co-living, where it's like kind of a necessity and people are living
Mhm.
there like super long term. Like I think it's called Nest in Copenhagen. They are one of the first co-living spaces, and they're really just an apartment. Like they really just believed in the concept of sharing space, but when it got down to it, they're more of an apartment than they are a community.
Mhm. Okay. And then you've been a consultant in co-living, and you've done lots of stuff. What do you think? Where you've seen the most operational improvements in co-living spaces? What didn't go well for many of them, or where do you see yourself major improvements they need?
I think people, this is bottom line for co-working and co-living, is people have a space and they think that that people will come. It's like you open a business and like people will come. It's like, no, especially with co-working and co-living, you need to have an email list ahead of time. You need to have a community. You need to be like doing things that people really like and they're attracted to it. And people will come and they'll be attracted to that. But I think it's super important to have your community first. So I used to run the co-working space in Chiang Mai, and then after I got done consulting for them, I still did all my events. I still have a Facebook group with like 800 people in it. I have my community of people, and they're all waiting for me to open the space, and that's when you're ready. Like
Mhm.
I would be really wary of people. Like you can do events out before you launch your space just to get the buzz going and get your email list going, get your community going, and I recommend everyone do that before. Yeah, and then I think it's a fine line. The other thing I'll say is a lot of people think they need to respond to every single thing that their community wants,
Mhm.
and they don't. So it's like a really fine line of like, what do you want to offer as a service provider? Because it is a service that you're providing versus
Mhm.
what your community is asking for. So it's like a balance in the middle. So like, um, for instance, in Thailand, the space owners that I was consulting for on the co-working space, they were Thai, and so they wanted to do very specific things. They didn't understand that like digital nomads there wanted a beer night every Friday night, and they wanted like this and that. And I was like, but this is what the people are asking for, and they're like, no, we don't think it's that important. We just blah blah. And I'm like, okay, you have to have a balance in the middle. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's what I realized doing my research as well. That it didn't matter what I read. It wasn't about how you design the space or how you the activities you offer or the services you offer. That it's so important to just include your residents and include them in the decision making process, because
yeah. Make them,
then
yeah. People
yeah,
like to be part of
then
the story. Yeah.
exactly. And then how would you describe your typical customer or like your typical resident?
Um, I would say for what I'm building is someone who, you know, makes good, stable money remotely, just wants to come in and have things taken care of for them in the sense of like they're coming all the way to Asia, they're not used to Asia. So we'll do like a landing package where we pick them up at the airport, get them a SIM card, get them set up. That's very specific to like really foreign countries where people are scared, and I think that's fine.
Mhm.
But then also someone who's really willing to give back to the local community, but also to the community in the space, and just like chill, open people. I think there's a lot of those in the world, and I think that if you put out the right, like I always joke, you know, the saying like your vibe attracts your tribe. So if people just calm down and just like presented themselves and created events that they're really proud of, like their community will come out. Like, you know, it might take a little bit to build, and that I've noticed that with myself. It's taking me almost 5 years to build the community that I have, but now it's like what Seth Godin says: you only need your 1,000 followers, and then they'll follow you anywhere.
Mm-hmm. I agree. But then you just mentioned the local community. What do you think? How do you include local community in your co-living space? Because actually, I've seen so many co-living companies that don't really do that. But I think to really create that co-living experience, you need to include the local community somehow.
Yeah, so we do. I also, me and a friend started something called Chiang Mai Entrepreneurship Association. So basically, we wanted to get all our goal was to get Thai entrepreneurs and foreign entrepreneurs to come together and like do business
Mhm.
together. So we do that every month, and we also do meetups for that. And we're starting a mentorship program with a local university to partner a university student who has to do an internship anyways for their course with someone who has a business that's a foreigner. So they get to practice their English, they get exposed to like foreign business, which, Thailand is pretty beginner
Mhm.
level when it comes to entrepreneurship. So we're doing a lot of initiatives like that with the local community, and it's going really well. People are super excited about it. And I think there's like so much you can do that if someone's not doing it, I think that they're being, in my opinion, they're being lazy, because I've worked in so many different countries where there's always something you can do to help out or just
Yeah,
to
I agree.
and, connect with the local community.
I mean, it's already, you already include your local community by just asking someone from a local yoga class to give yoga classes as your co-living space, right? That's
Mhm.
already something.
Yeah.
And then what I've also seen is that, for example, the impermanence of residence can create a lack of community. So what's your minimum of length of stay, or how do you overcome that?
I usually try and go for a minimum, at least on our website, it will be a minimum of 1 month. But people are usually there for a month to 3 months. It denotes kind of like if you're going to travel that far into Asia, you usually are going to be there for a minute, especially with time differences and stuff. Um, when I was doing the co-living travel company where we were traveling around, we would do a minimum of 1 week. But I really saw how that impacted our community, because people get attached, like they're friends and they're like, oh my God, you're leaving. People are trying to change their flights. So it's like, because so they can hang out longer together, and we just really see that they're connecting, and it kind of makes everyone sad when someone leaves. So I would recommend a minimum of 1 month. But it depends. Sometimes you have to fill seats, you have to fill beds in order to pay things. So I understand that. But I think overall that should be your general 1 month.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I guess it's difficult because on one hand, doing interviews with residents, it's like it's a transitional stage as well, and someone sometimes moving to a different city, those 3 months help you to create a network. But then on the other hand, um, I guess as long as you are there, as more the community is rooted,
Yeah.
I guess a balance is good. And then just what's your operating model? Do you rent the spaces?
So I've
Um,
had investors where we've gone in on spaces before. My current model that I'm falling in love with is coming in as a management company to an existing hotel or some sort of space that's functional that you can put minimal remodeling into, because so much of your overhead and your runway gets taken up if you have to remodel or if you have to spend 6 months on rent right away. And it
mhm,
just puts so much pressure. Whereas if you come in as a management company, and you can partner with the owner. This is just a model that I'm experimenting with right now, and it's working really well. Come in with the owner and just get a percentage of all the bookings. And then if nothing happens, then you're not, you don't have to pay any loans back. You don't have to pay any investors back. And if you already have your community, that works really well. I know in cities where things are more expensive, might not work, but for me, this is this is what's happening. I think
okay.
it's a model that people have not explored yet, and I'm excited to like give
No,
feedback.
that's why. Yeah, exactly. I feel that way. So, and then you've mentioned hotels as well. What do you think, coming from the hospitality industry, what do you think? Is there also the potential for hotels to somehow incorporate the co-living model, or you don't see that as a fit?
I think that I think it just takes whoever's the leader of the hotel or whatever is going to set the intention for the space. And I think if it's more boutique hotels, of course they can create that community. I mean,
Mhm.
you see that with I'm in Portugal right now by the beach. There's like surf hostels, and it's kind of like a weird co-living hostel-y, but it's like a hybrid. But I think most of hotels are so worried about just getting money in that they're more focused on the short term turnover, and they're not really understanding basically, if people don't understand the whole vibe of a community, they're not going to be able to do it. So if they can understand a community, they'll be fine. They can figure out the
Yeah,
rest.
yeah, exactly. And that's what it is, right? In integrating the co-living model into hospitality is just create community with your hotel guests and kind of come up with social activities and use that social space, rather than having only a few people sitting in the lobby and waiting for their room keys or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording now, and we can keep talking, but thank you so much for interviewing me, and I will do
Thank
that.
you.